Oscar, great to see you.
TJ, good to
Welcome.
see you too.
Looks like you're wearing brown and gold. Who would choose gold?
Yes, it is. I got my San Diego Padres jersey because it is the official start of baseball season, which is crazy that we're doing this. We're doing this. That should be the slogan for 2020. Baseball, we're doing this. Yeah.
All right. Well, Padres still have the Padre name. San Diego still has one major sports franchise. So yes, I'm a Padres supporter as well. Man, you remember that one year you and I probably went to like 30 Padre games.
That was amazing. That was amazing. It's terrible that they were so terrible. It's amazing that we got to see that much baseball.
Yeah, you would just use your Vespa and you could park right up front. I would just take the trolley. We were good.
Exactly. From my seat to my bed took maybe 15 minutes tops.
Whew. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that was a different life. Different life.
That was no kids. So
no kids.
Speaking of kids, what's new in your son's world?
Not so much new, just escalated. We are living the Moana life. Celestino's favorite movie by far right now is Moana. He's been through Cars 3, and it's Moana right now. So, and when I say that he's in a Moana phase, it means that we listen to the soundtrack every day, not just the official songs, it's the actual instrumentals, and then the deep cuts at the end, which are the songs that did not make the cut. And then
no one knows.
Like, no one knows. Yeah, exactly. You can tell though. And then we also we role play the plot to Moana. So we start the day, and I'm the dad, trying to keep him on the island, and then he goes from being Moana to then being Maui, and then he makes sure he does the I know it's a lot, the hair, the bod, and he strikes the bod pose. And then we just go on through the rest of the film. And sometimes he wants to start over again at the end of it. So,
well, we had our Moana phase was, I want to say, about a year ago, or our deepest Moana phase. It hasn't phased out at all. And it went from my big one to our small one. And she keeps saying, like, if I'm good, she's going to give me a Moana birthday. So nice of her. But we had a Moana birthday for my big when she turned 3. And I was Maui. I had to be Maui.
Yep.
And also Moana's dad. She's obviously Moana. My little one got to be Moana when she was a baby. And we probably need to FaceTime sometime this week so you can see our collection of Moana dolls. One of my girl's uncles, one of my brother-in-laws, sent literally a 4-foot Moana, which was funny, and he kind of did it as a joke. But I mean, and it would like sit on the couch. I'd put it in poses so that way, like if my wife came downstairs, she thought somebody was.
There's Moana sitting there.
But it actually got me my own jokes got me a few times. So we're gonna have to this week. We'll do a little FaceTime and we'll show off all our Moana stuff.
I need to see it.
I almost got. I looked online for a Maui costume and they had like a full bodysuit, and it had tattoos on it.
Okay.
And I almost bought it until I thought about. What do you think would be my concern with tattoos on a full body?
I could go a couple directions with this. One, are you afraid people would judge you in public and you'd attract unwanted attention, or is it cultural appropriation?
Cultural appropriation. So I actually had this conversation with my ASB class that year because we were just discussing whether it was cultural appropriation, how real are these tribal tattoos, and so I ended up going with an Aloha shirt instead.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, this week let's set it up and maybe we'll record a little bit so our class can see what a Moana party looks like.
I'm very curious.
All right, sounds good. So actually, let's go ahead and get into our news. Interestingly enough, we actually have a video question from Rahel. And Rahel's question is, well, I'll let her go ahead and take it from there, Rahel.
Hi, Mr. Carr, Mr. Ramos, it's Rahel, and my question is how legal is it that Trump is sending in federal soldiers into protests and having them take away protesters in civilian vehicles without telling them or anybody else where they're taking them or the reason why? Thank you.
All right. So
Okay.
that was actually the first thing on our agenda to cover today. The Oregon
absolutely.
riots. So she wants to know specifically how legal is it for the federal government in unmarked vans to essentially, it seems like, kidnap people unannounced and take people protesting who are exercising their First Amendment right. How legal is that?
I think the short answer is that it's not clear how legal this is. It's the Trump administration is certainly not going by any kind of standard protocol in doing this. There is precedent for sending federal troops into local areas when states are interfering with people's civil rights. I mean, this happened in the civil rights movement where federal troops went in to help students register for classes. In the South when I want to say Alabama, when the governor would not let students enroll in school. This is not that kind of case, though. This is the case of people exercising their civil liberties to protest police abuse of people, and Donald Trump isn't even sending the troops. These aren't troops. They're dressed like them, but there's just so much that is unusual, to put it lightly, in this, where it seems like it's Department of Homeland Security people. So they're not quite troops, but they're dressed like them. They don't have any kind of identifying information on themselves. They're showing up in unmarked vehicles. And so it's just lending itself to being totally non-transparent. And it's also troubling that I believe the head of Homeland Security is an acting head. So he hasn't been Senate approved. So the people making the decisions haven't necessarily been confirmed through the democratic process, and they have this temporary power before they have to leave because they're not approved yet to send in these officials to go in and abuse the protesters. So I mean, to your answer, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm assuming that this is not legal. I don't think it's gonna withstand a lot of scrutiny. It really depends on how much the Department of Justice is going to investigate, but the Department of Justice is controlled by President Trump and his people. So it really requires the House of Representatives to conduct an investigation and assume, and again, I'm saying assume that DHS, Homeland Security, will cooperate with any investigations. They're probably not going to cooperate, and so it's they're crossing a lot of lines here. I mean, I stopped short of saying it's illegal because I'm not an expert in that, but my suspicion is that he wants these federal officers to get attacked. I think that what Donald Trump is trying to do, he's very uncomfortable leading the scientific-based discussion over COVID because he's made a lot of mistakes. He's not handling it well. He doesn't understand the science. He has no attention span for it. And what he does very well is Donald Trump feels very comfortable fighting the culture fight. And so the idea of sending in, federal officers to fight with demonstrators who in urban cities who are, scaring regular Americans, I think that's more his home turf. I think it would play into President Trump's hands if these federal officials were attacked by some of these protesters. I think it's to the credit of the protesters that they haven't done it, because if the federal officers did get attacked, they would turn that into commercials. He would take that narrative that the government is under attack by these leftist radicals and we have to save America from these crazy people. I think that would play into his hands, and so I think that's probably what he's hoping will happen. I know he's talked about sending them into Chicago, and it seems like Chicago is somewhat going to allow it. There was a lot of mixed signals from the mayor of Chicago. The district attorney, I think in Philadelphia, has said that if these federal officials break any laws, that he would have them arrested and prosecuted. And so again, there's there's real potential there for some sort of actual violence to break out between these federal officials and any kind of local resistance, I think would play into his hands. He knows that he's losing the fight when it comes to COVID, and he's hoping to shift the conversation to this area where Americans really aren't totally comfortable, with the conversation against the police, and having, Americans firing or just committing any kind of violence against police officials would really play into Donald Trump's more preferred narrative. So I'm worried about it. But to your question, I don't know where the boundaries of the law are. Whatever the boundary of the law is, he's certainly overstepping any tradition. So that's kind of a somewhat short answer to that.
Well, and an interesting thing as I've watched it happen is, what if someone exercised their Second Amendment right to defend themselves when they're attacked by someone who is not stating who they are? And again, that's something that could play out, but I don't think the NRA is going to, they don't seem to be encouraging people to defend themselves against a group that's literally kidnapping people.
Yeah.
Because they're not identifying themselves. So it's not like it's not like law enforcement that's saying I am law enforcement. Who's going to stop? Like, someone could just dress up in fatigues and a helmet, and how do you know that that's different than? So I don't know.
If Obama had sent federal officials into the South, against Tea Party rallies to do this, the NRA certainly would have been talking about Second Amendment solutions to protect themselves from tyranny. I think it just goes to show that, we can talk about constitutional liberties that you have that are just like objectively there in the Constitution, and then just the social culture in the country where certain people are seen as more legitimately exercising that option. Basically right-wing white people their anger is more legitimized. Their use of guns and firearms is more legitimized in a lot of people's view. If you have Black people marching with AR-15s and using that very aggressive language of shooting the police, the country would freak out. Even still now, with a much more sympathetic country, they'd still freak out. I think it just reveals that that Second Amendment wasn't really meant for Black people and people of color. And even though it's there, it's those rights are for everyone. Socially, I don't think it's perceived to equally be for everyone.
All right, and that actually brings us to our next subject. You sent me a story this week that talks about, it took a survey and saw that the majority of the country, I think 70% of the country, support the Black Lives Matter movement. And they support that Black people should not be hurt by law enforcement. And so that's the part that they support. And it looked like also the majority actually don't support defund the police. And the majority also don't support knocking down of Confederate statues, removing the Confederate flag, and other things that it seems like the majority believes is part of our shared history. So what do you think about that?
There were a few things that troubled me. So we should send a link to that somehow into our post so that you can read that poll. I think what stuck to me about that poll is that there was also a big shift in people's support for Black Lives Matter and people's support for the idea that the abuse that Black people experience from the police they asked them, is it because of Black people's fault, or is it some wider systemic problem? And most people said it was a systemic problem, but then that dropped significantly in the last 3 weeks. So people were saying, they support Black Lives Matter, and then it dropped a couple weeks later. It said, there's systemic problems here, and then it dropped. They're sort of defunding the police, and then everything just sort of dropped in the last 3 weeks. And so they say they still support Black Lives Matter, but they don't support for the solutions, either from defunding the police has dropped, support for the symbolic actions like taking down the Confederate statues has dropped, and even support for the idea that this violence that they experience is not their fault. Like, that dropped too. And the question, well, why is that? I think that it's the the focused attention on the looting and the focused attention on defunding the police and how vague that can be. Some people think that means abolish the police. I think it makes some people nervous. I think support for Black Lives Matter is at a high, but the strength of that support is very, very thin. So people, I think.
So it sounds like people support, as long as it doesn't inconvenience them. They think that Black people should be treated fairly,
Mhm.
but they don't want any changes in what they perceive as their protection.
Yeah, they don't actually want to do anything because any of these actions that are being proposed are threatening to them. And so,
Police, as we talked about before, sounds threatening. It sounds like the police that protect the majority, or
yeah,
the police that protect them are now not going to be able to protect them.
right. So they're seeing all this police abuse, and that's terrible. Okay, Black Lives Matter. I finally get it that Black Lives Matter and that these police are overstepping their boundaries. They're becoming abusive. Okay, so should we defund them? I don't know about defunding them. Okay, so you really see how
then there will be chaos, and so that's what we debated before, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I'm not saying this needs to happen now. Maybe wait closer to the election. I mean, Biden does not seem as if he's for defunding the police.
No, he's not.
So maybe the actual term does need to change. Maybe that narrative needs to change. Maybe the explanation, maybe the PR about refunding social services in urban communities needs to be called that.